Welcome to the Parenting Different podcast, where we share real adoption stories, have honest conversations, and give hope for the hard days. We're here to encourage parents, build understanding, and make sure that every child is seen, heard, and valued. Welcome to the Parenting Different podcast. My name is Anna Bernacki. We have a fellow adoptee here with us today, Michael Gaither. I'm so excited to have you with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
You have a really interesting story. I think you are just a fantastic person. You're coming into this space and really wanting to give back to the adoption community through your learned experience. So introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing today in the adoption space.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Michael Gaither, and I am a former educator. So I spent 30 years in the education arena as a teacher, former principal, and executive coach. And I retired from that less than a year ago, and I started thinking about what I wanted to do moving forward. Quickly learned that just sitting around wasn't going to get it done. I still have something that I feel like I should be giving to somebody out there in this space. And so for me, it just kind of came a couple of months in after the retirement that, I think it's time to really tell my story as a transracial adoptee. And this is something that I had never done before. I'm 54 years old. So for 54 years, I've kept a lot of things just to myself.
Yeah.
Even though at 49 years old, I was reunited with my biological family. So that was actually the first time that I really feel like I became Michael Gaither for the first time, really understanding who I am. So I know we'll probably get into that later. But that's what I do. So I would consider myself an educator, always about serving people. Everything that I've done in my life, it really has been about serving others. And so, here I am, reinventing myself and who I am, and really just enjoying all the contacts that I've made so far in this adoption space. And I'm looking forward to continuing to learn from others who have been there, such as yourself, really on both sides of the coin. I know as we were talking, earlier, you
Yeah.
being an adoptee, but also being an adoptive mom as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited that you did decide to jump back into the space because I think you do have something so unique. I mean, we're hearing more and more transracial adoption stories come and talking about the struggles and some of that identity stuff that happens with them. But I think so many are either open adoptions, they're younger when they're meeting their biological family. And so you have a really unique story of being that other in a family for a lifetime before really meeting your biological family. So
Yeah.
tell us about, go back to the beginning. Tell us about your family growing up. And I know you told me some very, very funny and heartwarming stories of your childhood. I would love to hear, that those beginning years and what they were like for you as a transracial adoptee.
Yeah, sure. So I was adopted out of Syracuse, New York, when I was 18 months old. And my adoptive parents were living in Lincoln, Nebraska at the time. So from Syracuse, New York to Lincoln, Nebraska, being black child in a white family in 1972 in all white Lincoln, Nebraska, should probably kind of tell you a little bit how it
Yeah.
started for me.
Yeah.
So when I say white spaces, I'm talking about white spaces, and so, but as far back as I can remember, to being adopted, I mean, I was 18 months, so the first early years, maybe I don't remember, but I do remember some stories prior to um, kindergarten, right? So I kind of remember the house we were living in at that time. But I did know when I was from kindergarten up through elementary school, I was very aware of how uncomfortable I was in this adoptive family. And I know it, of course, I know a whole lot more now sitting here at 54 than I did when I was six.
Sure.
But at 6 years old, what I realized is I couldn't define what I was going through. I can now do that just because I have lived experience of being the adoptee in a white family for that long. But some of the problems that I had as a younger child. I mean, I had a temper. I was always getting in trouble at school for something. It was usually in response to somebody teasing me. I talked with you a little bit about I, I didn't want to tell my story. I didn't want people to necessarily know that I was living with white people, right? And I'm just one of those people that keeps it real. So in my talking today, I just keep it real. I'm not using clinical language here. I'm not doing any of that. I'm
Yeah.
just
No,
giving
I'm
you this is just how I talk, right? So
yes.
so I was trying to make sure that that my peers did not know where I lived, who I was going home to, because I felt like I was going to have to explain my story. And I didn't really know how to explain my story. I don't know. My life just started and it started with white people, right? Like I don't have anything else that I can really tell you when
Right.
I'm sick. Right, I'm 6, so I don't have the whole background on how I got here, and that's part of the reason why adoption, right? I mean, it can be tricky to explain because it's
Yeah.
not something we didn't ask for it. We started here. We're dealing with the hand we were dealt, so to speak. And so here we are. And so in elementary school, those were some of the things that I was really struggling with, was trying to hide, not being able to hide because you have to go to school every day. But I didn't want you to know where I was coming from for fear that I'd have to explain it, and I had no words to explain it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So did your family talk about adoption at all? I mean, obviously you're a different race, like there's an elephant in the room there, right? Like, so was it kind of like, oh, you're adopted, end of story? Or did you ever discuss what that meant in your home?
See, that's the thing. Not really. When I would get mad, and this maybe been upper elementary school into maybe middle school, I would get in trouble about something and I'd start saying, you know what I mean, you're not my parents anyway, right? Because I'm thinking, one, I was thinking, what I mean, I have to say something to you because what you're saying is getting on my nerves. So I kind of knew where to hit home, what I mean? You're not even my real parents. And so I remember saying those things. But no one really ever talked about the adoption. I think when I would say, you're not my real parents, this or that, I mean, I was trying to kind of lead them into saying something maybe about my real parents, but I didn't. So it was kind of this push and pull, right? Like I wanted to annoy you, you know what I mean, when you
Oh,
annoyed
yeah.
me, you know what I mean? But I'm also trying to
Oh, I
pull,
said it too.
yeah,
I know. I think
don't
every
you?
adoptee has
Yeah,
said that.
you know. We have group meetings about that sometimes, right? We
Right. We
talk
plan
about
it.
how we're going to get them. So, but they didn't really talk about it. Every night, man, I remember my adopted mom saying one time, she thought my birth mother was young, and that's why I was adopted because she was young. Turns out she was 23. I mean, not that young. I mean, she
Right.
wasn't
Young-ish.
right? But so she was 23 years old. But they didn't have much. That's the only thing that I can remember them being able to tell me outside of I came from Syracuse, New York. And so, my adopted father used to have, he would always have an office, and in that office there was this silver box, and it had all this important information, and it had my birth certificate. I used to go in there and just stare at that birth certificate hoping that maybe the names on the birth
Mhm.
certificate would change because it was my adoptive parents, not my real parents. And that was real to me, right? I used
Yeah.
to kept going back there. I knew exactly where that box was, and I open it up and I look, and then I'm thinking maybe there's something else in here that will tell me something. And the box wasn't even that big, right? It wasn't a huge silver box, but I was just hoping new information would land there because that's where my mom and dad kept the important paperwork. So I'd go back to that periodically looking like that my somewhere in this silver box has to be my story. Nobody's telling me. And somewhere this has to be my story. So, but I never found anything else till later in life.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting you say that because I had a similar experience, and I've heard so many adoptee stories. When we're doing well and we're getting good grades, people think, or we don't discuss it, we're not asking questions. The assumption is, oh, well, they're fine with their adoption. They're well adjusted. They're good. And the truth is, we may not be saying it out loud, but there are always questions, and we always
Yeah,
want to know our story because, I mean, there's just DNA. They always talk about nurture over nature, right? And I think in the adoptee community, and I think this is changing as, research has progressed and things, but I know growing up, it was expected that while you were a baby when you came to us, so clean slate and nurture versus nature. Like nurture was you were going to be like your adoptive parents, you were going to act like them, talk like them, and that was just expected. And I think it was shocking for them when I mean, yes, I have mannerisms, of course, sure. Because you grow up with somebody, you're going to do things that are like them. It's just part of growing up with them. But there are also things that are deep in my DNA that are not like them at all. And no matter what, they couldn't get it out of me. And it was like
right,
that for my brother too. My brother's also adopted, and we were different biological families. So but we both had fire in our veins that they
yeah,
couldn't get out of us. It was just DNA. And so I think that when we see that difference, we feel that deeply. And maybe a parent can sit there, and I've seen that with my kids, be like, oh, that's their mom. Oh, that's dad coming through. And we kind of brush it off. But for them, that difference is like boiling over. Where is it coming from and why? And I think it's so important for adopted parents to realize that just because they are not asking, just because they are not questioning you, they still want to know where this is coming from. And those differences, whether it's race or just simply a personality trait, they want to know where that came from. They want to be able to assign it to something.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And and I looking back, I think to my experience. I mean, you talked about earlier about feeling, your adoptive parents may look at you like everything is okay, right? You're not making waves. I went through this experience, during somewhere in middle school where probably everything seemed like I had settled down and everything was smoothed out. I mean, I was in seventh grade and I went off on my adoptive mom. She asked me something about chores, and I remember coming home. I can't remember if it was the summertime, but whatever it was, I was coming from being around the city on my bike, doing whatever I wanted to do. All of a sudden, I come home, she's going off on me something about my chores. And I remember, and I had to have been like 12 or 13. And I remember I just lost it. I mean, I lost it. I tore up the entire house. I tore up the living room. I'm flipping over furniture. I'm breaking tables. I went in the kitchen and I just destroyed everything in the kitchen. All the plates broke them on the floor. Everything I threw out of the refrigerator, and I just lost it. She ran outside. I remember pushing her in the bushes. I remember my neighbor calling, saying, "Hey, Michael, leave your mom alone." I ran down the street, and they said, the police are picking me up in the neighborhood. I ended up at a mental, I mean, I ended up at the hospital. And then the next thing I remember, they were putting a shot in my behind, and I woke up in another city in Omaha, Nebraska, with a nurse standing over me. And now I realize I've been dropped off here at this mental health facility with other kids that had various issues, other teenagers, so on and so forth. And now I'm just really angry, right? I'm like, oh,
Right.
this is crazy. I'm here. You left me here. And so, so I was there for a few months, at least. I was taking school, at the facility, and I was like long enough to make friends, inside the facility. And so, I mean, that was a rough time, I think, for me, because my temper was I was just out of control, right? And I didn't
Yeah.
really understand where the anger was coming from at that time. I do now. But this is a
Right.
long time coming. But back then, I did not know, and so it came. So after I was there for a few months, and I came out and I went back to school, all of a sudden there was this period where, I had met my first black male teacher, right? And all of a sudden, life changed for me in that moment and I didn't know it. Now, mind you, I was still coming off of this mental health experience, right? Where I was confused, so on and so forth. But luckily, here was this black male teacher that was my PE teacher. Shout out to Timothy Carroll, but he was such a great influence on my life, and I kept going to school every day, pushing through some of the other things that were uncomfortable, and looking at him and saying, "But this guy, there's something about him. Look, he looks like me." Right? He likes sports just like me, right? He understands who I am, that sort of thing. And so, but there came a period where I think I kind of settled down. All of a sudden, I wanted to get good grades. I wanted to play on Mr. Carroll's basketball team. I wanted him to know that I was doing well. So there came a time period in there where I think they felt like everything is going fine, but it
Mm,
wasn't going fine. I just
yeah.
learned now how to hide my real feelings and what's going on. And so at that time, in the summer times, I may be 12, 13 years old, but I'm already, with my brother and I'm his friends and we're smoking weed and we're drinking and all these sorts of things. But what I'm doing is trying to find some sort of calm to my life because that my world is spinning around and nobody seems to understand what I live through every day. And I need something to calm that down. What I now know that I've struggled with my whole life is anxiety, right? And still today, what I mean, there are times when it's almost unbearable. But where does that come from? I realize now as a kid, I didn't know what it was, but I've always had that, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
I've always felt a little uneasy, just out of nowhere. All of a sudden, heart racing and nothing's going on, type of thing, right? And where does that come from? So I think, for me, I wanted to go back to your point about when people think things are okay, you got to ask, deeper questions sometimes, right? And I remember the questions at my parents' table, my adopted parents' table, you know, tell me three things you learned at school today, right? And I'm thinking, three things I learned at school today. Well, I was so busy just trying to navigate the school environment and run from the people who were going to be teasing me or making me feel uncomfortable. Learning was never the priority when I was young, right?
Yeah.
Learning really, I'm going to be honest, learning really didn't start for me until college, right? Because I was always in those years, elementary, I'm angry. In middle school, I'm trying to find myself, but I'm also getting involved in some other things, that weren't good for me, that age in high school. I'm playing basketball and running track at that time. So then I could hide behind being the athlete, the
Right.
athleticism. That drew
Right.
people in because I was, oh yeah, you're good, this and that. So that drew people in where I had this sense of, well, I can do something well. But
Yeah.
it
You had that
wasn't
validation and
validation, right?
yeah.
But then when I wasn't doing those things, just walking around school, there's still people that I'm trying to avoid. There's still people that I don't want to talk to. I don't want anything to start up. There's still the white kids, right? And there's still the black kids. And anybody who's been a part of transracial adoption, I think sometimes this is what parents sometimes can miss. Not all do, but some. But I think the most powerful visual for somebody is here you are. I'm black. I'm raised in a white family. So I live in a white space every time I go inside my house.
Right. You're
Every time
different every single moment
I'm
of every day.
different. Everywhere you go, you are different, right? And you feel it. When we go out to eat, that's just one of those things where a family, a normal family just says, hey, we're going out to eat. You kind of go, you don't even think about it. Everybody's served. Every time we said that, right? Every time we go out to eat and we're standing there and I'm in front and with the rest of my family, I'm the black kid. You feel the stares, right? You
Yeah.
feel it. And you feel it when people are kind of looking across the way. What's going on here? Who's that little black kid? You feel it even at a young age. So you're already in an uncomfortable space. But also when you go and you're in spaces like when I went to high school, there were more black kids there. So when I go to high school now, I'm not that comfortable with you because I've never really been around you in large groups. I may have met, I met my first probably best friend now, my black friend. I met him in seventh grade. And then there was Mr. Carroll that I told you about. But I really didn't, there were a few of us in classes, maybe in junior high, but not nothing major. So I went to high school. Now there's more black kids. I went to the most diverse high school in Lincoln at that time. And so, but now I still don't feel that comfortable, what I mean, with y'all. Y'all got kind of a different language. Y'all talking about things that I've never really heard that terminology before, so on and so forth.
Right.
So I don't want to look stupid in front of them, but I'm also don't want to walk around and just be hanging with the white people either, because you know how we do. Then there's gonna be, oh man, he ain't black. He ain't really black. He's
Right.
a boy, down
Yep.
that. And kids aren't always nice about how they say things, right?
No.
So I'm trying to, like, you're trying to avoid any issues coming up. And so you spend your entire school day trying to figure out how to survive. So when you ask me about what did I learn, what I learned to do was to survive today. I made it back to home base. And that home base was somewhat uncomfortable because now I'm here. I want to tell you what I'm going through about trying to survive the day, but because you don't talk about race, we don't talk about these things. I don't have any models in my house or anybody that I was hanging out with that I can point to say, oh, yeah, I get it now. And we're never talking about it. So now when I'm coming home, instead of coming home and wanting to say something, I retreated to my room, right? You shut the door, you turn on the music, you're alone with your thoughts, right? And so to this day, at 54 years old, I'm more than comfortable being by myself, being alone, right? That's still the most peaceful place for me is when probably, I'm sitting here, and I'm not talking about my family, my direct family, anything like that. We're all fine and good. But I don't have an issue with sitting in my garage, for example, for hours on end if I want to, because it's just peaceful. I'm not bored. I'm not anything. So, and I learned that from when I go back in time. I was always doing that as a kid because I was getting away from the noise that
Mm,
just seemed to always be around me. If that makes sense.
yeah. Yeah, that does make sense. And I think that it's so it's one of those things, like, your parents were actually trying to connect with you at the table. They were just completely missing the mark. And I think that happens so often with adoptees. And then when we say that, then, oh, well, they're angry. Oh, well, we weren't good enough. It's like, no, this is an opportunity for you to learn. Like, I'm not angry about it. My parents didn't know what they didn't know. But I can educate other parents and say, hey, this is what was happening. Yes, your parents were being intentional and trying to connect with you. They were just asking all the wrong questions
Right.
and starting the wrong conversations. And that impacted you in such a profound way. And I think that it's so important to remember. And so talk us through what would have been, like, I can talk from my perspective, but as a transracial adoptee, what would have been the helpful questions at the dinner table, the helpful ways for them to connect with you? Because I think, yes, we have good parents who are trying, they just don't know what to do.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one jumps out at me right away. And that is, a lot of times we ask, what are three things, you liked about school today, right? And we try to go with the positive, things to keep
Right.
things positive. So, what did you like about it today? What was fun for you today? All those sorts of things. I would have liked kind of the reverse, was
Mm.
anything going on that was bothering you, today, right? Because,
That was
we
hard
know,
to, yeah,
yeah, we know in life that there's sometimes, experiences where we can be uncomfortable, right? Is there anything that's making you uncomfortable, today? And I'm not saying that you have to ask that every day. What I'm saying is I would have liked to have more of these check-ins to see how I'm doing because to me now, even though that's 1972 on, for me
sure.
now, it just seems like, but for me, I'm still black, right? And you still know that I'm in all these white spaces, right? And there were signs that something's not going right with him, right? Because the teachers are saying he has a temper, he doesn't want to do his work, so on and so forth. So something wasn't right, but I just never felt like that the questioning that was provided to me allowed me to speak as openly as I could at whatever age I was at, right? But sometimes things have to be done through questioning. And so, and I say this all the time. Listen, my adoptive family, I know they love me. You know what I mean? That was never in question, right? But they didn't know what they didn't know. I'm saying this now. I wish that maybe they could have been in contact with a Michael Gaither or an Anna, then, right? Back then. So they would have had those resources. Things, of course, have changed over time. There's more resources now. There's people that are talking about transracial adoption. I mean, you can get it in 2 seconds, right? And you can find somebody who's talking about the subject. And you can find transracial adoptees that are willing to speak out and say, hey, this is what it was
Absolutely.
like. And I didn't learn this by studying books. I learned this by living through this experience, right? And so now I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about telling my story. I'm passionate about speaking out so that you will have parents of these kids understand that I don't want them to have to wait 49 years, right, before they recognize who they are. And that doesn't mean everyone's going to have a reunion like I had. That doesn't mean that. It
Right.
means, though, but to feel comfortable in your own
Mhm.
skin with who you are, who you've been exposed to, people who look like you, people who talk like you, people who understand your experiences. That's the thing. I don't want them to have to wait that long. And so now it's about, getting out here and interacting with people like myself, like you, and others that have lived experience on what this adoption is all about.
Yes. And I think it's like you said, that lived experience, because even the researchers, I am so thankful that there are researchers, that there are people doing the research, and that they are getting this information. However, there is nothing that compares to that lived experience.
Right.
And I think that is so important to really like be able to have stories like yours and be able to talk through like this is what would have been beneficial to me. This is what didn't work. And obviously every single kid is unique and every story is unique. But something you said too, this was when you were talking about high school, and I was listening to it was Isaac Etter. He has a documentary, and
Hmm.
one of the things he said was because he was in a raised in a white family, he didn't feel like he was black enough to be with the black
Hmm.
kids. And I asked my oldest daughter about that. I was like, I have a question for you. Do you feel like having white parents makes you less black? I mean, without a beat, she was like, yeah, it absolutely does. 100%. And I was like, oh man, like I'm sitting here trying to do everything right. And even then, it's not ever going to fulfill all of those needs. Like there are pieces of transracial adoption that are hard,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
acknowledging it, talking about it, and saying, I'm sorry. I wish it was different. I wish society was different. I think that almost it was like a weight off of her shoulders, just
Yeah.
having me ask that question. I can't fix it. I
Right.
can't do anything about that,
Right.
but we can openly talk about it. And I think that's something too that parents are so afraid to not bring something up if it's something that you can't fix.
Right. Right.
Just acknowledging it is
Yeah.
so important, and
Yeah.
being able to say, "Hey, I'm really sorry." Like, I know that that sucks that when you go to school, you feel obviously you're not white and you
Right.
feel less black than the
Right.
other black kids. That sucks. And just being able to have those open conversations, you don't have to fix everything to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just think about that question, right? Do you feel less black by having white parents? It's just a question, right? All
Yeah.
that is a question. And and you didn't know what the answer was going to be. That's
No.
what you just did right there. Take a risk, right? And that's what be one of my messages to parents is be willing to take the risk. You don't know what your kid is going to say back. And whether you're adopted or not, you never know,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I learned that from being a middle school principal. Be careful of the questions you ask because they just might answer with truth. And you might be shocked what some of those middle school kids will tell you if you ask the questions, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing by going home and with your kid as a parent. You know, at the end of the day, ask questions. You know, what does it hurt you to try to learn what your kid is going through, right? What does that hurt? And you know, oftentimes we talk about um, you know, kids have to have a certain sense of discipline, right? There's discipline that must be you know, seen in your home and felt in your home. When discipline is not there, right? You got another problem on your hands, right? You get the ones that you get
Absolutely.
teachers.
Yeah.
Sometimes. You get teachers who sometimes you make the mistake of not going all in on discipline in the beginning of the school year, right? Instead, you wanted to be friends with everybody, right? But those are the teachers that struggle, you know, over and over again because you're busy trying to be friends and you forgot about, you know, I mean, the fact that you need to be providing that discipline. But if you're mentioning asking the questions, right? And parents, if I could say anything to parents, right? The most important thing you can do is ask questions. You already know they're adopted. You already know that they look different in your family. A lot of times we talk about in the transracial adoption space, we talk about how love, right, isn't enough. And I agree with that, right? Because I didn't have to want for anything, right? I had a roof over my head. My parents were well known in the community for the work they did and the service to others, right? So I'm not talking about that at all. They loved me and they provided for me. But I was living in a whole different world when I left the house, right? I mean, you're still living in a different world within the house because you're still
Yeah.
the black one there, right? If you got
Right.
a big Thanksgiving dinner and all your family comes, there might be 25 people here in this house, but I'm still the only black one, right? And so, that's when I think about that, I think about there's this whole world outside of the house that you have to remember. And while you're going to work for those 8, 9 hours a day, you're sending me off to school. And all parents need to have a good understanding of what their child went through during those 8, 9 hours they were away
Yeah.
from, right? And in this space that we're talking about, man, I just wanted you to ask, right? I
Yeah.
wanted to have more conversations about my discomfort, right? What made me uncomfortable on the daily. But I gotta say, I'm not blaming my adoptive parents
Right.
because I got really good at hiding everything, right? I got really good. And the
Still
reason
we
why,
have.
and why did I hide it, right? I hid it because one, there's this I don't want to make my adoptive parents feel uncomfortable, right? So we sometimes try to be the protectors of their feelings, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Adoptees carry such a tremendous weight
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
protect our adoptive parents' feelings. And if it's an open adoption, we're protecting our biological parents' feelings as well.
Exactly.
It's a
Exactly.
tremendous weight that's put on adoptees.
Yeah. So I didn't
Yeah.
want to go there necessarily. Two, if you ever bring up something and that you feel like it's dismissed, right? You bring up
Yeah.
something where you took a risk as the adoptee and you brought it home to your parents and they say, "Hey, listen, this is what happened to me," right? And I took that risk. And then it was kind of like, oh, they were probably just joking around. Oh, they were just, people do that. And so it seems like you dismissed how I really am feeling about
Yeah.
this situation that made me uncomfortable. I remember that. And the next time I have something to bring, I learned that, you know what, I probably just need to shut it down because they're not going to understand, right? We've been here before. So I'm just going to keep it to myself. And so I practiced that over and over again. And I got really good at it. And so now you think everything's okay. Everything's good. He must be fine, right? You know what I mean? He's going to school every day. Seems like things are kind of, settling down for him and this and that. But you have to be cautious because just because things get silent doesn't mean there's not something raging on the inside.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, it's so important as a parent. You made the comment, you said, what do you have to lose to ask those questions? And I think as an adoptive parent and as an adoptee, I have a unique perspective because I know what I wish I had been asked and what had been said. I know what I wish. And then being the adoptive parent, I know how it feels to also love a child so much and want them, you want to be their everything. You
Right.
want to be the only parent that they are going to come to. You want to be that for them. And so then I end up having this war inside of me of, okay, I know I have to ask the questions.
You could be doing everything right, right?
Yeah,
Um, and when I say that, you love your kid. You're being mindful about those topics that affect race, right?
yeah,
You're asking questions. You understand the situation. You understand that they might be dealing with something that they're not sharing with you, right? Because and it may be because it's not because they don't want to. Maybe it's because they're trying to protect you. Like you get all that.
yeah,
So when totally get where you're going with this. And I just think that parents, and this is what got me into this work, was wanting to help parents understand what it feels like from this perspective. I read a lot of stuff, right, on adoption, right? A lot of groups and talk to a lot of people about adoption, been doing it in education, all those things. But I think there are times when I sit back and I just say, you know what? People just need to keep it 100% real, right?
yes,
This is hard. It's
it
hard
is.
to be an adoptee, right? And it was hard to have been raised in a white family. There are still things that I live with today that I know. I don't know what my life would have been if I wasn't adopted, right? I only know the adopted life, but I know that there are a lot of things that I went through that were tough that I struggle with, and it was all based on me living in a white family. And that's like I said, I think it's about providing resources and providing,
Absolutely.
and kids obviously need exposure, right? But I got into this work now to provide resources for, white parents that are adopting Black children. That's my passion. And that's why I'm on here today. But I just wanted to go on your point about it's not going to be perfect, but what in life really is, right? What are we really perfect at? So I don't know why we get in our feelings that we're not perfect parents. We're not,
Right,
right? I mean, like I said, I got a 26-year-old. I'm not perfect.
right,
We had a great relationship, but at the end of the day, I'm not perfect either, right? Make mistakes, and we'll continue to make more. But just because you're adopted, or because you've adopted kids, doesn't say, oh, well, you know what, you can't, you don't get to make mistakes, right? You get to make mistakes, but it's about how you talk those things through. And I wish I could have had the vocabulary and the words to help my parents understand what I was going through. But there are certain things you learn in education. They're about age
right.
appropriate behavior. I don't have the words. I don't know what this is. All
And
I know
kids
is
don't.
yeah, I'm angry. I don't feel well. I don't feel uncomfortable around them. I think of times in high school, even when I was, in basketball, they do the senior nights. They do like the senior night. So we're celebrating our seniors. It's the last game this senior will ever play in front of the home crowd. And I can remember even as a senior in high school, everybody knew me by then, probably knew who my parents were, this, that. But at halftime, when they call your parents down, to the basketball floor there, and I'm standing in the middle, I still feel this sickness about it all because everybody now, 2,000 some people, eyes are on me. Here's the Black kid with his white parents, and I remember thinking that then, hurry up, let's get this over with. I don't want this attention right now because you train yourself and you're trained over time to think that everybody's looking at you, right?
Right. Especially as a
Everybody,
teenager.
every
Teenagers really think that they are the
yeah,
center.
yeah. Like, what are you looking at? What are you looking at? What are you looking at?
Yeah.
Everyone's looking at us. You know what I mean? Yes, I'm Black and they're white. What are you looking at? Right. So I,
Yeah.
was, I carry that with me. Right. And so now all of a sudden the whole gym has just been like you. And whether this was true or not, you feel like when people called my parents down, I felt like there was this hush that went throughout the gym,
Mhm.
right? And I'm just like, see, this is why. This is why. Same thing when I was in first grade and they said that it's grandparents' day and my white grandmother was going to have to come up to the school and you're going to have to talk about your grandmother. And I didn't want her to come. Not because I didn't love my grandmother, because I don't want to have to explain. Okay.
Right. It
You know,
adds too much. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, but no, nothing's going to be perfect. And I would say, yes, this is hard. But at the same time, I also know that sitting here today, there are certain things that I have benefited from going throughout this experience.
Yeah.
And this doesn't have necessarily to do with my parents, but it's that I've been put in a position where I'm very comfortable communicating with anybody, right? No matter what you look like and who you are, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth, because I've been forced to communicate my entire life with people that, I didn't share that many experiences with. And so you get good at that. And so I think part of me going into education, and looking back on it, I probably went into education because I just became very passionate about kids, right? And wanting to help kids. And I think I have always remembered probably what I didn't get as a child. Because as kids, we have dreams about, we can look at another kid and be like, man, I might want to be in your family. You look like you got it real good. And I'm looking over there, look at you, I want to be
I
in
think
your family.
it's
Right?
especially as adoptees, because in a
Yeah,
way we have this mindset that we can like shop for families. I remember
right.
doing that too. And my kids do
Yeah,
it. My kids will be
yeah.
like, I want to be in that family. I'm like, okay, well, that's not quite how it works, but yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. So I mean, you kind of remember, those times, and I don't know. I'm just one that at the end of the day, I realize how difficult this has been, for me. But the goal now is to ensure that others, don't have to walk the same line or go on the same journey I did, because we have more resources now. And I think there's people are just more comfortable talking about it, right? I've met
Yeah.
people on both sides of the coin. Some people who say, you know what, that it shouldn't be allowed to happen, right? White parents shouldn't be allowed to adopt black kids, and they're angry about it. So I don't fall on that side. I believe it is possible because, like I said, it's not like I didn't survive the experience. I'm here today, right?
Yeah.
I am. But I think you can give back to those that haven't been all the way through it yet to understand,
Hmm.
like, listen, there are people out here that your story resonates with us. And I'm passionate about those that are going through it right now. And it resonates with me. And if you talk to a lot of adoptees, you will, and you know this, but you'll be surprised what they describe as therapy, right? And sometimes the therapy is us talking to each other, us
Yes.
hearing experiences. Yeah, man, I wasn't crazy. You know what I mean? Back in the days
Yeah.
when you thought I was, I'm hearing other people talk about that, and they've got the issues too. And so it
Absolutely.
does become therapy in a sense.
It really does. It really does. So, fast forward to you ended up meeting your biological family much later in life. This is like a big subject change here.
Yeah,
But I want
yeah.
to get to it before we get to the end because I think this is so fascinating. What was it that made you decide I need to figure out where I came from? This, like, enough is enough. I need to figure this out.
Yeah, it never really left me, as a kid, and I just felt like, somebody's out there. At some time, I'm going to meet them, but in New York at the time, adoptions were closed, and so I didn't really have high hopes that I was going to be able to like crack the code, because I was like, where would I go with this, right? And so
Right.
at some point, through research that was done through the I don't know, family services, Lutheran family services back in Nebraska, that played a role in the adoption. Somewhere along the line, we were able to get some information for them. I felt like I had my birth mother's name, and then doing some research, found her phone number. And so, I don't know. I probably was in late 20s, early 30s when that happened, and probably about 33, 34 years old. After carrying around that number for a couple of years, I worked up the courage on one night after work to come home and just give her a call. right? And that's that. And that was when I was probably like 34 years old. So it was probably 20 years ago. And that night when I called her, I was mentally prepared for her reaction, so on and so forth. And I believe that I said something along the lines. She said, hello. I said, hello. And I just kind of went in and said, listen, does February 1, 1972 have anything to do with you? And that was my birthday, whatever. And so she got quiet, on the phone. And I said, Mom, this is Michael, right? And I know that I was adopted, I was Syracuse, 1972. And she said, well, how did you get this number? And I knew right then, this is you, right? Because
Yeah.
me, how did
You
I
just
get this
admitted
number?
it without admitting it.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I knew then I did it. So after about another few seconds, she's like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And she hung up the phone. Okay. And then that was it. So then I called back. And when I called back, somebody else answered the phone. I left my number with them and just said, listen, if she ever changes her mind, my number's not going to change. I still have that same number to this day, by the way. So it never has changed. But I didn't push it any farther until another probably 15 years. And something inside me when I got to be in my late 40s and you start doing the math, I said, man, our lifespan is such long. And then, man, she probably in her 70s at this point. I gotta try this again. Right. So then I went on to Facebook and I was able to find like a DNA angel site. And I told them my mom's name, where she lived. And then they did this little search. About an hour later, they came back, said, we think we found your brother. And so then I was able to, go on Messenger and send him a message. And then he confirmed that he found out about me about 9, 10 years earlier, right? But that he was my brother. Okay. And
So
so
he
then,
didn't know until.
yeah, yeah. So one of my brothers on my mom's side did know. And I guess he spent a lot of time in the early days really trying to find me and what happened to him and so on and so forth. We got to find him. I need to find my brother. And then eventually, he kind of fizzled out. He gave up, on the search. I don't remember how old he was, but he was also telling me this story. And so, after understanding that was my brother, he gave me the name of my other brother. We were able to reach out, contact him. But at the same time, I was also doing ancestry DNA. So
Okay.
my ancestry DNA results came in, and then I had, 12,000 matches or whatever. And so you're looking on there, and I'm going, well, here are the close matches. My maternal grandmother was on there. I had some first cousins on there. So I started messaging everybody. And, long story short, people started messaging me back. I was coming off vacation, and now I'm talking to my maternal grandmother. I'm talking to first
Wow.
cousins. I'm talking to some great aunts. And they're inviting me back to a reunion that was going to happen in about 6 weeks. And now at this point, my mom's not in the picture yet, but they invited me. So I said, well, I'm coming back to Syracuse, New York, which is where I was born. I'll be there. Right. So I'm at that point, I'm like, oh, this is great. So now I'm talking to my brothers again, and they're telling me, well, one of my brothers is saying, I don't know if she's ever going to be ready to talk to you. My mom, kind of a private, person, keeps to herself, so on and so forth. So they don't know if she'll be going to come around to be wanting to talk to me or not. But over the coming days and weeks, one of my brothers had talked to her and said, hey, she's getting curious. She's asking some questions about you, and whatever. I said, well, that's a good sign. Just, I'm not going to like push. I don't want to, put myself in a situation where if she's not comfortable, I'm fine. I'll just talk to whatever family members are willing to
Yeah.
talk to me. So that's how I left it. And then all of a sudden, one day in June, I'm sitting out back and of my house, and I'm actually working on some DNA stuff, trying to figure out the family tree. And my phone rings, and it's my birth mom, and there it is. Here comes the number. I'm running in the house. I'm like, oh man, this is it. And I'm hearing her voice, and we talked, I don't know, for maybe a couple hours that day. And then from then on, over those 6 weeks up until that reunion, we talked probably, I was keeping track, probably up to almost another 65, 70 hours of talk time on the phone.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we would talk so long that you have one of those cordless phones, all of a sudden the battery runs out. Well, that was 5 hours of talk time. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we talked and talked and talked, and then when it came time for the reunion, there was going to be on the Saturday, there was going to be all these family members in the park. But on that Friday before the actual barbecue, in the park, we met, my mom and we met for the first time. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I called her and said, listen, we're outside your apartment. She came to the door, let us in. And I was, as soon as she opened the door for the first time, it was like looking in a mirror, right? So I'm 49 now, but I'm looking at my mom and I'm like, oh, there is just no question. And so what I was always what I always wanted to experience growing up is when when I think about my friends and say, y'all just don't understand. When y'all come down the stairs every morning, you know where you came from. You know who you look like, right? And you might be taking it for granted. You don't have to think about it because you think that's just how things go. No, I've never known who I look like, where I came from, but I believe there's somebody out there, right? And I know they're living right now. I'm just going to say, I'm thinking it in my mind. It feels like they're living, right? And I need to know
Yeah.
who they are. So this was a big moment then that I could share with my mom, just kind of what I had been experiencing, how I've been living, that the fact that I never thought, I never blamed her for anything. She made the decision she needed to make at that particular time. So there was never blame on anybody's side. What I just needed her to understand is that, hey, one, thank you for making the decision that you did. You see, I'm fine. But I wanted her to know what I had been through, that it hadn't been easy, but that she never left my mind because I got a mom out there somewhere. So it was nice to be able to, I think, share that with her.
Yeah, that's
And
beautiful.
it kind of went from there. And then I met that same day, we met my maternal grandmother. We went over to her house, had a blast. I mean, she probably was about 91 or 2 at the time, right? And then the next day we had the picnic, out there in the park. And I'm just seeing family members, right? That all of a sudden they look like me. Man,
Was
I
that
see
overwhelming to you? I feel like that would be so overwhelming to have that
oh
all.
my God. Hey, I will tell you what, I've always been asked my whole life, where did you get your green eyes, right? How can
Mhm.
you be black and have green eyes, right? And I'm thinking, I don't know, right? You know
Right.
what I mean? But
Mhm.
I do. And
Yeah.
so people assume that because I have lighter skin and all that, you must be mixed, and one of your parents must be white, black. I kept trying to tell people, I don't think so. I don't think that's the way it works, right? You just kind of know. Speaking of black hair, right? Listen, I got, you can't tell, you can only see on my beard now, but I got real curly, you know what I mean, hair, it's kind of
Yeah.
nappy. Like I said, nah, I'm not feeling that, right? So I'm pretty sure that's not the case. Come to find out, it's not the case. My mom was black, my dad was black. But when I go out there and I'm looking, they're asking about the green eyes. I start seeing black people now with green eyes and hazel eyes, so light colored eyes in this park. I'm scanning around the room, and and one of the family members told me, she said, yeah, she's like, she said it runs in the family. So now I have the answer to my question where I got the green eyes. I got it from being in the family with all these other folks that got nice colored eyes, right? So,
Yeah.
it's just something that you learn. And so the over being over, I guess more what I was overwhelmed by was how smooth it was to be welcomed back, right? And
That's incredible.
and just people asking me questions and telling stories and talking about just the past and how they found out about the adoption, and just they always wondered where I was and all these things, and then to be able to tell them the story, like this is what my life has been like. Man, it was just like a full circle moment. And to this day, I mean, after that I found out who my dad was. I found out he's no longer living, but I found out who he was. I have siblings on my dad's side as well. So I've met my dad's side, a lot of people, my dad's side of the family. And my dad was one of, I think, maybe 17 siblings. And so when you think about the size of these families, like I have a
Yeah, that's huge.
whole big black family, black world out here that I never knew about. But I've been to other family reunions since, right, on my
That's
dad's
amazing.
side and my mom's side. So it really just has been full circle. I'm here, and I talk to my mom on a regular basis, other family members and brothers, and I have a sister, as well that I found out about on my dad's side. So it's just been a lot, but it's been a great experience, and that's how I describe it the most is that through the journey, through all the things, through all the growing up feeling uncomfortable, right? The navigating between black spaces and white spaces and never really knowing where you fit. It's the always trying to, I think, be fake, you know what I mean, at certain times, right? Because you have to be in order to survive in
I
that
don't,
space.
yeah.
So there's that piece of it. There's when you start coming into your own, and when I went to college, I could start researching what it meant to be black on my own, right? So it really I had my college courses, but I'm also going in pretty deep, just trying to figure out who I am, so that I
Yeah.
know what I want to do moving forward in life. And so there was that piece, and then you get into being an adult and you're successful. Right. And you want somebody to know. I used to always remember thinking, I wanted my birth family to know, listen, man, I am somebody though. I became somebody through all of this. And I'm not going to lie, I had this burning desire that they needed to know that I'm okay. Right. And I don't know how many people talk about that, other adoptees, but
Yeah.
for me, that was huge. I cannot die before my biological family knows that, you know what, I'm still here and I'm okay. You always wonder on your birthday, are they thinking about you? Right? On these special
Oh my
holidays,
goodness, yes.
right? Right?
Yep.
I didn't like my birthday, man, probably until I was like 40 years old, right? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Where I just kind of
My
like,
birthday is so hard. Yeah.
yeah, birthdays are hard, right? And
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, you want to celebrate. I'm not feeling any of this right now, right?
100%. Yeah.
Because it just brings up that day. Because that would have been the day somebody came in there and said, hey, I take you from here and now you go here, right? And so that's the thing. And I think that lives within you, that separation, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You feel it. And it's hard to explain, but you feel it. And I felt it deeply throughout my life. Something's missing. So to come full circle and now know, I could call my biological mom right now. You know what I mean? But to know I've answered that question.
Yeah.
We got a great relationship, and it's just
That's
but like I
amazing.
said, full circle moment, and glad to have had that. But now I think what that reunion did was springboard me into this work. I mean, it took a few
Yeah.
years after this and all this, but now it's just like I know that, man, the power, this might be the most impactful thing that I ever do in my life. And it started when I was 54. And the reason why is because this isn't work. You and I were talking about
Yes.
this is work.
It's
This
not.
is who we
Yeah.
are. This is
Right.
who we are. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about hearing people's stories. I'm excited about jumping on podcasts like this. I'm excited about coaching parents that want support, you know what I mean, as they're raising their black child. I mean, I am this has been something that just kind of came out of nowhere one day. And I
Yeah.
thought, you
That's
know
amazing.
what? I can do this
Yeah.
because there's nothing I think I'm more passionate about at this stage in the game for me because it's a different type of education,
It
right? I
is.
know what school education is about, right? Been there, done that. But this education is, you're educating parents, having an opportunity to do that about what it feels like and not to assume that because that black child looks okay when they're at home, I'm telling you they're going through stuff. And even if they may not be going through it this year, it's coming, right? Even though you may not be going through it, maybe you get through. You've just been at a great school and it just happened for you. But somewhere it's coming. It's coming in the community. It's going to come one day when the police pull you over. Because one thing, the police don't care whether I grew up in a white family or not, right? You know what I mean? They don't ask those types of questions. You know what I mean? What they know is I could be targeted. I could be racially profiled or whatever it may be because of how I look, that they don't care about my upbringing, right? So how do you? So if we know, I had this conversation with my black son about, listen, if you get stopped, we got to do the two hands on the wheel thing. Here's the conversation. You don't make the sudden movements because I know I wouldn't be being a good dad not to have the conversation for him to be prepared when he was in that situation. And guess what? He got into that situation, right? And so there you go. And so, my thing is for parents just to understand this is something that you know, you got to make sure that you're exposing your kids, right, to what's out there. And there are dangers out there. And if you're not talking about those things, or if your kid isn't recognizing, even for example, that they're black. I mean, if we're really talking, some folks in my situation, right, they don't identify, as being black. They may be younger than me, but they don't identify as being black because they're in those white spaces all day long. They're going to white schools, they're going to white churches, you go home to a white family. You don't have to be in those spaces now, but somewhere along the line, right, you're going to be communicating and probably talking with, people of color, other black people, this and that. And what happens when we start talking, people start saying, where are you from? You know what I mean? Because it
Right.
doesn't, you don't, because we say, well, you don't sound black, right? Well,
Yeah.
I understand that, and I think there is some, when people talk, like I get what they mean when they say that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I but I also am careful because when you say that, you can be saying something like, "Well, you don't sound educated," right? And that there's a way to talk, right? Because you're using correct vocabulary or you're doing this.
Right. There's other implications to that too.
Exactly, exactly. But it's just something. If we were having this conversation, right? These would be conversations you could also have with your kid, right?
Yeah.
You and I are having this, but
Right.
again, if I know that you're going to this school and you're one of a few black kids in that school, like talk to me about the conversations, right? And where does your kid interact with people that look like them? I'm a believer that kids need mirrors, right? You got to be able to look in them. You got to be able to see somebody, know who you are. You got to be able to have parents that put you in front of people who look like you. I
Yes.
never had a black person that I can think of outside of my best friend that ever came to my house, sat in my living room, talking to my parents. I don't remember my parents interacting with black people. If they did, it didn't stick out to me, right? So I didn't know how to communicate in a lot of places because why would I? I never talked to y'all. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know what collard greens taste like unless I have some, right? So, I mean, I
Right.
don't have them, right? So,
Yes.
yeah, that's another thing I found out from my best friend. She started hanging around the black people. The cooking got a little bit better, okay?
I was gonna say we my daughter and I are going to do, I don't know when we're gonna do it, but we're gonna
Yeah,
do a podcast and basically just roast having white parents and like
yeah,
all the
yeah,
hilarious things. Because she was 10
yeah,
before she came to
yeah,
live with us.
yeah,
So she lived in a black home and then came to a white home.
yeah.
And so I was like, this could be hilarious. Like
Oh,
we just are
yeah,
gonna talk about all the things, like her culture shock coming into a white home and
yes,
how funny
yes,
it was. And the different, like some of those stereotypes. We always talk about the black stereotypes. Let's talk
yeah,
about the white ones and let's make
yeah.
fun of the white ones.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That hey, I would tune into that. I would tune in. I promise you, I would tune in. That would
Yeah,
be great. That would be fantastic. Because and that brings up another point though. Man, have fun with your kids, right?
exactly. It
You know
doesn't have to
what
be all serious.
I mean, what is this? You listen. And adoption is one of those things. I think sometimes it gets people think that well, once you're adopted the good deed is done, right? You've adopted the kid and you're good, right? But when you adopt, you're signing up for a lifetime
Right.
of
That's when the
being
work
a parent
begins.
to that kid, right? A lifetime. So now we got to understand that, I mean, once, even for black kids, right? I don't know how this is, but once you figure out how to do their hair, right? And there are hair differences, right? You can't do everything to your hair that you can do to your kids' hair,
Right.
right? So
Exactly.
sometimes people think once they figure that out, now we're good because the hair is what people see, right?
Right. But
But
even
now,
then, have you really figured it out? Or are
yeah,
you just managing? Because
yeah,
there's a
yeah, no, no,
difference there.
that's true. That's true. That's true.
Because
So
I've learned
even
to manage. I haven't
yeah,
figured out how to like
yeah. So
succeed.
even if you've done a good job managing the hair, right? There's a lot more that you're going to experience as that
Yes.
child grows and as that child matures.
Yes.
But you got to keep talking, and you got to also be willing to be uncomfortable in your world for the sake of
Yes.
them,
100%.
right? Because they're
100%.
uncomfortable.
Yes.
They're uncomfortable maybe every day. But if you're not asking questions, you're not communicating with them and asking the real questions that find out whether they truly are okay, or to make your household a comfortable place where they know, hey, we talk about these things here. Come on to the table and give them, sometimes when you're talking, if they don't feel like talking right then, let it breathe. Come back to it later,
Right.
right? Because don't force it, because in the immediate moment when you ask me the question, I may not feel like talking about it because I'm thinking, I just got through it. I survived. I made it back to home base. Now you want to talk about it right now because you see something on my face or you're feeling something.
Right.
Well, if I don't feel like saying anything then, let me not say anything then, and then come back to it. Right? You know what I mean? Because sometimes, just like in anything, you need to let things breathe for a moment. And it's
Yeah.
not everything isn't instant as we think it is today, right? Because now, we can get on this podcast instantly. You know what I mean? You can send out messages to the world instantly. But I think, sometimes we need to let things breathe. And I think that would be one of the things to parents that have, that have adopted kids. And kids are in some of these uncomfortable situations. It's not about, interrogating them. I don't mean to say that, but every
Yeah.
now and again, those check-ins, if you ask me one thing, I would have wanted way more check-ins on this experience and how I'm feeling in the environments that I had no choice to be in. Right?
Yeah. And I always say, I I think the best place to do this, and this is what I've discovered as a parent, is instead of serious sit down conversations. When you go sit in the living room and you're face to face, it's serious and it's intense and it's intimidating. Riding in the car, going somewhere, you're
Yep.
not face to face. You're
Yep.
sitting next to each other. You can be looking at other things.
Yeah.
And that is when I have discovered to ask or bring up some of those deeper things
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
it lowers the pressure. And I know somebody else talked about slouching. She parents from a slouch. And she
Yeah.
was like, I literally will slouch and throw my hands on my knees and, kind of almost slouch like a teenager. And it just lowers the pressure because when you're, okay, we need to talk, that's very intimidating and they're going to
Yeah.
shut. But
Yeah.
changing your posture or location can really open up the door to having more honest and open conversations
Oh,
when
absolutely.
topics are hard like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up about the car ride, because I told you my son's a teacher. And just
Yeah.
last week, I was visiting him out in Kansas, and I was speaking at a father son banquet. And
Wow.
and as I was talking about being his father, because this was for fifth grade students. The banquet was for fifth grade students at his school. So he was there as a teacher, not my son. But again, I was asked to speak and then give some words of encouragement, whatever. But I was talking about how when he was growing up, we never wasted a car ride, right? Because
Mm,
in the car, that's where deep conversations happen.
it
Some
is.
people get in there, and I told the dads that were there, I said, turn down the radio, right? Sometimes we're just listening to the music, but there are opportunities right there when your kid is right there that you can find out things in that car. And you're absolutely right. It's not a face to face sit down. Hey, we need to talk. Come into the living room. You're thinking, what are we in here for? We never sit in here. Right.
Right.
so,
You think you're in
so
trouble and
yeah, yeah.
defense goes up immediately. Yeah.
Right, right. So when you can put them in situations where they feel comfortable, right, and then to let things, let them drive the conversation sometimes, because sometimes you
Mhm.
might have the question, but then sometimes I think, we also need to be able to stop and listen deeply to their response, right? And
Yeah.
if you don't know an answer to one of those questions, don't make it up, right? But make
Yes.
sure that they feel like that's worthy of a discussion, right? But maybe you've got to do some more research. Maybe, you got to get back to them. Maybe you got whatever you have to do, it's worthy of a discussion, but you don't want the child to think, hey, you didn't care about that, right?
Right.
Or you were making excuses about whatever it may be.
Right. Because I think, and just like you were digging through a box of papers when you were younger, these are sleuths when it comes to information.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
going to find out.
Oh, absolutely,
We are
absolutely.
going to find the answer.
Yes,
And
yes,
so
yes,
you need to tell the truth. And if
yeah.
you don't
Right,
know, then say you don't know. Don't
that's
try
right.
and be a hero or protect the
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
I can handle hard if
right.
it's the truth. Don't
Yeah,
sugarcoat it to
right,
make me feel better in the moment because then later I'm going to find out the truth.
right,
And
right.
so and that's across the board. All adoptees
Yeah,
are information sleuths. They will find out. Don't think you can pull one over on them. Age
yes,
appropriate honesty.
yes,
Answer
yes.
honestly. And even if that is an I don't know, that
Right,
sucks. I'm sorry that I don't know that.
right.
That's better than making something up or sugarcoating to protect them from the real truth.
Absolutely.
Because they'll find out.
100% agree. 100% agree.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and hearing about your story, and you're just a wealth of wisdom.
Thank
Where can people find you? I'll put your website in our show notes too, but tell us
you.
where
Yeah.
if they're listening, where can they find you?
Yeah, so a couple of places. One, Beyond the Moment adoptionstudio.com is my website. I also have plenty of resources that are on payhip.com
Okay.
backslash payhip.com, Pay dot I'm sorry, payhip.com, payhip.com backslash Beyond the Moment Adoption Studio. So there's plenty of resources on there as well. And so, but one of the things that is a free resource is a free guide. It's called Seven Conversations Every White Parent Must Have with Their Black Child. That's a
Okay.
free guide that can be found by going to my website on Beyond the Moment adoptionstudio.com and just sign up for the free guide, and that'll lead you to some deeper work along the way as well.
Fantastic. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I
Well,
appreciate
thank
you
you.
being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me very much. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to continued work here with you down the line.
Yes, for sure.